Battle Shapers. Is it worth your time? I'll go ahead and tell you, it was worth my time, but that's not why we're here. This is about you. So let's talk about if Battle Shapers is worth your time. Alright, so imagine Doom Eternal's combat, but make it a roguelite and sprinkle in some Mega Man for extra seasoning. That's Battle Shapers in a nutshell. You play as Ada, a recently reactivated android who must reclaim the city of New Elysium from the Overlords and their robot hordes. The gameplay loop functions kinda like you would expect from a roguelite. The run starts, you grab your starting items from the hub. Your gear in this game includes weapons, abilities, which can range from grenades to a ground slam that launches enemies, to a turret, which is my personal favorite by the way, and more. Also, during runs you'll come across core enhancements, which are pretty much like your perks. The builds you can end up with are pretty fun. For example, on one run, I had enhancements that caused reflected projectiles to seek enemies, increased damage on reflect, and all my shots had a 50% chance to reflect off of surfaces. The weapon I had has a charge mode that releases like a slow-moving shock orb that does great damage and pierces enemies. So I could shoot the floor in front of an enemy, this shock orb would pierce, home in on the target again, and just like work its way through the whole pack of enemies. That was probably my most fun run. Also keep in mind, all the gear and core enhancements are only with you for that run, because I mean this is a roguelite after all. Moving on to tower selection at the start of every run. Bosses are not tied to specific towers, which results in modifiers being different from run to run, as both bosses and towers have their own modifiers. For example, Strike Mantis will reinforce the enemies during a wave with a laser turret, and the Gravity Garden has gas mines. Just one potential combination you can get. Eventually, you're given access to what they call Shaper Hacks, which are modifiers for either the current floor of the tower or for the next encounter to control your reward. Along the way, through exploration and defeating enemies, you'll unlock ciphers. Blueprints, basically, that let you unlock permanent upgrades which can be bought with Terrenium, the game's meta progression currency. Things like new weapons and abilities that can spawn during a tower run, increased health, shield recovery, or even starting a run with bonus credits, the second currency. Credits are used to purchase gear, core enhancements, and sometimes health during your runs. All pretty standard fare for a solid roguelite. Also, speaking of health, it does not regenerate. You have shields that you can restore through pickups and using takedowns on vulnerable enemies. And then you have health, which only restores if you buy a health pack or defeat a boss. So let's say you beat your first boss. Awesome. You'll now gain access to a new ability and new upgrades to work towards. This ability is a game changer, so once you get that first boss under your belt, things get even more fun. Now once you kill bosses, you can unlock their cores to equip for more core enhancement options. Later on, as you defeat the bosses more, you can level up their cores to gain access to new Shaper Hacks, and eventually you can equip the boss core as your primary for a new activated ability. The devs have also released a roadmap of the updates for the rest of the year, which includes one each month for a nice flow of content to come back and check out. Also, by the way, this review was made possible by the awesome folks at terminals.io, so thank you for the key, and special shout out to Dakota for making it happen. A couple of side notes here. The controller support for the game is great. I played exclusively with controller with zero issues. Also, if you were hoping the game had co-op, or if the devs were planning on it down the road, they have no plans for co-op at all. Battle Shapers is strictly a single-player PvE experience. So, let's talk about what really stood out for me with the game. For starters, the soundtrack is a bop. I mean, listen to this. So +1 there. Solid soundtrack all around. Fits the feel of the game, and I love the vibe. The gameplay is fast and smooth. Like I said earlier, it feels really inspired by Doom Eternal's combat in the best way. With how health and shields are handled, it leads to a constant back and forth between playing safe to not get hit and diving fist first at an enemy to restore your shields. One thing I didn't touch on before is that all of your weapons and abilities in a run can spawn with modifiers, which makes build diversity great and keeps every run interesting. For example, you may get a rifle that does fire damage and pierces, and your other weapon may be a shotgun that does 100% bonus damage to burning enemies. You may get a turret ability that reduces cooldown by 30% on kill and has 2 charges. You never know what you'll get. The bosses are all interesting visually. I love the design of Strike Mantis especially. Difficulty-wise, it took me about 8 runs to finally bring my first Overlord down. They are tough at first until you learn their patterns and what builds work well for you. Also, the ability you get from your first tower clear helps a lot. I will say, not all 3 of the bosses are created equally, however. I'd say Volt Colossus is the easiest, then probably Wind Magistrate, with Strike Mantis being the toughest, as its laser attack is kind of tricky to time the dodge on, and the boss seems to be the most aggressive of the 3. In my opinion, all these elements come together in a winning formula to make every run fun and interesting. Do you know that old Lay's slogan, bet you can't eat just one? Well, that's how I feel about Battle Shaper's tower runs. So, back to our original question. Is Battle Shapers worth your time? I absolutely love it, so it's been worth mine. And I would say if you like roguelites and FPS games, this one is probably for you. Let me know what you think. And if you enjoyed this review or it helped you at all, let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, bye-bye.